I'm Matt Carpenter.
And I'm Peg Keogh.
Welcome to the College Podcast. We are going to be your ultimate guides in helping you figure out how to navigate this maze in such a way that you don't lose your minds or your wallets. Let's get started. Okay, everybody, welcome to the College Podcast. We get a special edition today. Good news, bad news. Bad news, no Peggy today. So you're stuck with these two college aid bros. We'll do our best. So we got a special edition. I'm calling it the Get to Know the CEO. Welcome, Kevin James Degnan.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carpy.
You bet. What we're going to do is a couple things. I mean, for the most part, Kevin, or Degs as we call him, does very little in terms of front facing. So a lot of our audience and ecosystem probably doesn't know a whole lot about him. So I want to try to change that. We'll get to know him a little bit. And then we want to talk about this problem that is our college system in the United States. So, number one, historically, how did we get here, or from our point of view? And more importantly, how can we solve it? Which has been a hot topic for a long time, especially over the last couple of months. And we're excited to address that problem because we think with some of these sweeping changes now is a great opportunity. But let's get to know Degs a little bit here. So Degs, from my perspective, and I'll talk about, I think it'll come together naturally, kind of how we overlapped, but a little bit of a unique background. So Degs,
I'm going to interrupt you the first time right away.
Please.
Look at this. You're going to, for the audience sake, you're going to embarrass me very minimal amounts, right? You promised ahead of time.
Minimal amounts,
right?
I promised
I'm the
you.
man behind the curtain for a reason. Okay.
We can cut out, you're the boss. We will cut out whatever you tell us to cut out. So
excellent. All right. Excellent.
whatever makes it live is,
awesome.
Ultimately up to you. Possibly.
Possibly.
Unless I think it's too good.
I'm in charge of nothing. Let's be clear.
Yeah. So Degs grew up on South Shore, Massachusetts, beautiful beach town known as the Irish Riviera, as we call it here.
You know it.
Marshfield, Marsh Vegas, better known as Marsh Vegas down there. And I think one of his unique credentials, one of 8 kids. You don't get that a lot in this generation.
Yep.
So let me see if we can do this live, Degs. Can you give us the Good Will Hunting name of all your siblings?
You know I can. Yeah. When we were little, we used to practice who could say it the fastest. So Lauren, Krista, Peter, Tommy, Kevin, Joanna, Mark, and Amy. That's me and my siblings.
That's pretty good.
For those who keep a track, I'm number 5. I'm right in the middle.
That was going to be my next question. So number 5 in the pecking order of 8. And again, I know it's all that you know, but maybe being removed from that a little bit. How would you describe a household or childhood growing up with as one of 8?
I mean, my parents, whenever you see a movie come out that was like Cheaper by the Dozen or any of these with like the crazy families with lots of kids, they would be insulted. They'd be like, it's not that crazy. I beg to differ. I actually do remember it being pretty hectic. I mean, my mom, God bless her, was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked as a federal agent for the government, and it was just activity all the time, right? Like kind of, get out of the house, go run around, go play sports, I'll see you at dinner time, type of thing. But it was just, there's always someone around. You're never alone. Basically ever, right? When you're a kid, that's probably sometimes a bad thing, right? There's no privacy, no attention. My siblings would probably all laugh if they listen to this, that I was starved for attention probably as a kid, as we all were. But as an adult, it's a benefit, right? You'll never be alone, right? There's no loneliness. There's siblings everywhere. I live back in my hometown, and 3 of my siblings are a stone's throw away, right? So, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to even just think about, picture whatever. And again, it's especially like having kids of our own. It's like, how was that possible? But somehow it was.
Let me add one more thing. So like, the craziness of it, right? There was the Irish Catholic stereotype, right, is a real thing. Carpy, on the North Shore, there's plenty of families like mine. There's a couple more in town, but we were definitely well known as the huge family, right? And to me, like the example I always use is 8th grade was in our public high school, right? So it was 8th through 12th. When I was a junior, we had someone senior, junior, sophomore, freshman, 8th grade, right? So like if you're our generation, you knew one of us, if not all of us, and every teacher would laugh like, are you guys cousins? You all related? And I'd be like, no, we're siblings. And it was just one of these, okay, here we go. Pretty amazing. Yeah, but it informs a lot, everything, right? Kind of how you approach the world and stuff. It's we could spend a full hour talking about big family life.
But we'll skip right to the we're skipping lots here, but I want to skip right to your college application experience.
Wonderful.
I'm going to tell it from my point of view and my
My
memory,
sob story? Yeah, okay.
and you can correct me.
Yeah.
But as I recall it, you applied to all. Well, by the way, let me give you some credit first. You had a phenomenal academic career, athletic career. You were recruited on both fronts in high school, right? Had a great, as strong a resume as you can have. Applied to, I think, again, my memory, all Ivy League colleges and Stonehill College. And again, as I recall, you didn't have a choice. As soon as you wanted to go right into grad school, it was denied on every college except for Stonehill.
That's correct. Yeah. So I was recruited. We have a great football program here at Marshfield. Go Rams. And football was competitive there. And then again, I was near the top of my class. So like Ivies were recruited pretty heavily. All the coaches said your academics are a slam dunk. Like we'll get you in, no problem. I had some NESCACs in there, so that's the one difference is I had I'll name drop Wesleyan and Amherst College are on the list as well. But it was all Ivies plus those two, and then my safety school was Stonehill. And then injury. So I got injured the end of my junior year and then middle of my senior year. So then the recruiters from football sort of the phone stopped ringing, and then it turned out all I had to go on was my academics, which I thought was good enough. Turns out it wasn't, right? And so when I got that April 1st, wow, today, right? I guess what is it, 25 years ago today, almost 1999. I got whatever 5 or 6 declines and 1 acceptance letter, on April Fool's Day. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. It was on April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
And just like take me through your morale, I guess.
Just total shock. Right? Being removed from it now, it's sort of like laughable that I cared so much, but it was I can't go to school tomorrow. Everyone's going to be talking about where they got in. I think of myself as sort of a standout in my class, and I'm going to go in and be like, I got rejected everywhere, right? And Stonehill, which my friends knew, I had, classmates, they asked why I was applying to Stonehill. I'm like, literally the answer was, it's on the Common App. The coaches have been recruiting me. I literally have to do nothing. That's why I'm applying there, right? So that was it. So I'm like, I'm going to have to go to school tomorrow and be like, I'm now going to Stonehill College or taking a year off. Like I was just like, I think in retrospect, everything was going according to plan, right? Good athlete, made varsity as a sophomore, right? You get accolades for being, stand out in your class, all these things. And then all of a sudden it was just like the real world hit me in the face pretty quickly where, oh yeah, you might think you're something in your little bubble of Marshfield, Massachusetts, but the reality is like you're one of 10,000 Kevin Degnans that are applying to all these schools. And you know what? Your resume doesn't stand out, right? And that's kind of the long lesson that sort of stood out. But at the time, it was just like, how the hell am I going to go to school tomorrow and face the music here?
So I got a 2-part question for you.
Yeah.
Because number one, and again, especially knowing you, my guess is that at the time, and maybe there's no such thing when the wound is fresh, but like at the time, do you remember if anybody offered advice, guidance, whatever, that resonated with you, that you were actually able to hear and be like, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better or whatever? That's kind of part one of the question. Number two, if you go back in time or today, right? We're going through it right now. We're going to go through it today, where there's going to be in the class 2025, all these brilliant kids, right, that have done everything they could have possibly done and more, and they're going to get denied at their top choice. Or they're going to go through some variation of what you did. So the second part is, what advice would you give to those kids, yourself, whatever?
Yeah. So the first part was like at any kind of tragedy, you find out who cares about you and why they care about you. Like stuff you don't tell someone until something bad happens, right? So I had a lot of teachers approach me when they found out, right? In my mind, there was buzz going around that Kevin got denied from all these schools and that. Yeah, exactly. Everybody, but I mean, but all my teachers knew about it, and a couple of them specifically made a point to pull me aside and have some really good conversations. And I just remember the head of the English department, who's kind of a family friend, he knew my dad, great teacher. And he just sat me down. He's like, Kevin, I'm going to tell you right now. He's like, we as a faculty are stunned, right? He's like, and I'm not. He almost got teary-eyed a little bit to be like, we're stunned. He's like, there are slam dunk kids every year, and you were one of the ones this year. And he's like, I don't know what to tell you. He's like, I can't imagine how horrible you feel. But I just remember that sitting down with him and just being like, he was genuine, right? He's like, I am as stunned as you are. And I was like, that was like, okay, good, right? Again, like I was sort of like, what did I do wrong? Why did I think I was going to get in? Like clearly, my parents were sort of hands off because they thought I had it under control, and I was sort of like, why didn't someone tell me I wasn't going to get into any of these? Like, and I just remember him saying that like, you did nothing wrong. Something's wrong. Something's happening this year where like someone like you doesn't get into any of those schools, like Yeah. So I remember that. And again, just a lot of love for people being like, wow, holy crap. Like just you get more praise right, in a tragedy than you would have otherwise, right? So
Yeah.
that stands out to me. It was just a lot of support, like true, genuine support for me, and like don't feel bad, you did nothing wrong. And then recommendations are, it's hard, right? Because like I'm looking back, thinking back to who I was as a kid, high school senior, junior, senior, going to college, seeing where I wanted to go. You're driven by stuff that is so irrelevant in the grand scheme, but you don't know. So like, it's hard for me to say, here's what I would do. And in hindsight, I guess it'd be, what are you trying to get out of college? What's it really supposed to deliver? Right. I applied to every school I applied to was because I thought I was playing football there. And as you and I both know, we met as freshmen at Stonehill College at football orientation. That was a means to a social network rather than like going pro, right? So like that just like disillusionment has to happen, I think, naturally. Like I think what's the quote is like I think a famous author said this, like I wish I was bigger rejection sooner, or I wish I found rejection sooner, because that's just that teaches you to how the world works and kind of move on. So like long-winded answer, I think the advice I would give is like, we say it all the time, so it's a bit cliche, but like, it's not, college isn't the destination, right? It's part of the journey, and like treat it that way. 4 years will go by in the blink of an eye. Like who you meet there will be more important than like the logo that you have on your resume, right? Which is,
Agree strongly with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just a harsh reality of our human experience that it's like, rejection builds resilience, and that leads to like allowing you to have a more fulfilled, happier life. And that sucks.
It's horrible. Yeah, but it forces you to look at who you are and what you want to be. And, again, it took, this wasn't a snap the fingers. Like I wanted to transfer. I talked about transferring for a long time. That was the thing I said the next day at school was like, oh, I'll just go there for a year and I'll transfer. That's what I told everybody. I remember I'm laughing about it now because it was like, that was my excuse. Oh, I'll just transfer to Harvard next year. Right.
Yeah,
It took me a long time, probably a decade, to be like that. That's a really horrible experience. But in the end, it's, in terms of horrible experiences, it's a pretty easy one. And like that perspective, it just takes so long for it to settle.
Pretty good segue too.
Awesome. There we go.
Your next rejection, your next spat of rejections. Because you did, I can attest to this. You had an amazing collegiate career, similar. You just destroyed it in the classroom, right? Had a great athletic career, record aside. But same thing. Did everything you could do. Remind me, what'd you major in again?
So it was economics and math for my two majors.
Okay, so both. Right. So double major.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty good. And then applied to law school, and I think similar deal, right? Like all the top 20 law schools. I even feel like maybe I'm giving myself too much credit here and whatever revisionist history, but I even felt like I might even been like, Degs, don't set yourself up for this again. I kind of knew the story. Maybe I said that, maybe I didn't.
We've talked about it a few times since then, so maybe I'm misremembering too. But you were there, right, when I was filling out my applications. So we're all living in San Diego together. And there was like that was a little bit more eyes wide open strategy, because I was working for a law firm, I was paralegal, I was like putting in the work to try to say, is this career I wanted? And everybody, not everybody, but collectively, the advice was, if you're going to go somewhere, make sure it's a top school. Otherwise, the expenses are probably worth it. And if you go, you better do really well if you're like planning on whatever. And that can just go sort of like, all right, I guess I'll take my shot. But the reality was I didn't even know if I wanted to go. And it was sort of like, that was, trust me, it didn't feel any better getting the wait list answers or flat out rejections. But, again, it sort of said, I'm a glutton, I guess, for punishment.
Exactly. That was my take. And that remains true.
Yeah.
But
that's why I work here.
But that's right. Okay, so then law school's a no-go. We're off to the Peace Corps, and what was the driver there?
So truly, like, I think my lesson learned from all those rejections and just like getting a little more perspective on the world was like, I am not unique. I do not stand out. If I was reading my resume, I wouldn't be impressed either. Right. It was sort of like, there's nothing unique about this, like about my sort of on paper profile. Right. I'm like, you haven't done anything that stands out. I think graduated college at the time, right? There was a bit of the .com bubble had burst, and it was hard trying to find jobs. And it's like, we're all out there trying to figure it out. And again, I didn't stand out. And again, I had to challenge myself. And then we had friends of ours, right? That, a high school friend of mine and a good college buddy of ours did the Peace Corps. And I remember thinking, that's unique. That's interesting. Plus they were in the middle of it, a year plus into their service. And I was like, I heard what they were doing. I was like, that's the kind of challenge I have to take to really just see what's out there, right? Why am I just going to be like a lemming and go to law school and hope to get a good job and keep it staying in the cycle? It was sort of like, I got to bust out of this thing. And again, I was following the footsteps of our friends of mine who were already doing it that I was impressed with.
Well, I'll push back on a little bit in the sense that I think your resume did stand out. So no, to me,
Well,
you hold yourself to quite the high standard.
Thanks, buddy. Don't to the law schools that declined me. But yeah,
I will. Yeah, this is going law schools that declined them. You were wrong.
yeah,
Ivy League colleges, Wesleyan, Amherst, wrong.
yeah, in your
I'm glad
face,
we got it
Brown.
right.
Brown, I'm coming to get you.
Okay, so I guess two-part question here. Try to be whatever, somewhat concise but still give it its airtime. Why Peru? Right? I know you ended up at Peru. How did that come to fruition? And then how would you summarize, encapsulate? And this is a hard one to keep concise, probably your Peace Corps experience.
Yeah, so the way the Peace Corps works is they look at your resume, your kind of language abilities, what you studied, right, what your experience is in, and they'll say, oh, we have these programs in these areas that might be a fit. So the recruiter is the one that tries to do the matching for you. There's obviously you have to go through a very rigorous health screening as well, right? So you can't have any injuries because you're gonna be out in the bush, for lack of a better word, on your own. So you can't have any serious health issues. I had a minor knee surgery. Can just clean up some cartilage or something, get an old football wound.
I know, I drove you.
That's right. But because of that, again, the recovery was like 3 weeks, but any surgery you have to wait. So I actually got placed in teaching math in East Africa somewhere. All right. The way Peace Corps works is they tell you the region and the program. They don't tell you the country. At least that's how it worked, again, 20 years ago. And I was ready to go, because the recruiter says, where do you want to go? Here's the programs available. Will you take any of these? And I was like, sooner the better. I'm ready to go. Right. Law school was now a maybe later idea, but they had to decline me because I had this minor surgery. So you have to wait 6 months no matter what, just to make sure there's no complications. So then the next program that came up was small business development in Latin America. And again, speaking Spanish or taking Spanish, high school, college, I was like, that sounds awesome. And again, those are the kind of more harder programs to get into because everybody wants to speak Spanish and be in some of these countries. Like for our Peace Corps brethren that might be listening, there's Peace Corps and Posh Corps, right? They joke that some countries aren't as hard as others, and those are Posh Corps. My grad school friends who were in other places like Mongolia or in Africa, they would call Peru Posh Corps. I don't agree, but it's always funny. So yeah.
So you had another denial, East Africa. How about that? Well, okay. So Peace Corps.
Yeah.
Well, and again, actually, let me give you your time. Just talk. Anybody thinking about Peace Corps or
this is a separate podcast for sure. It's the greatest experience. Behind, I think, meeting my wife and having my children, like Peace Corps is the most formative experience I've ever had. Right? It just exposed me to the world, really challenged me. It can kind of reset my perspective on how blessed I am and lucky and just what matters. Again, that's a longer conversation, but you will not regret it. Again, it'll make you stand out. It'll make you the unique life experience that you're looking for in the grand scheme.
That's probably a good point. I'm not that I met a ton of people. I've never met somebody that went to the Peace Corps that said, boy, I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Similar. Yeah. Okay. So we went Peace Corps, Peru, and then I believe next stop, University of South Carolina.
Yep. Go Gamecocks.
Go Gamecocks, went on to get your MBA. Now, I know you have, maybe you can kind of like talk about both of these, but I know you have some thoughts, maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that, the MBA or grad school,
yeah,
it's not for everybody. It's a huge but less talked about contributor to our student debt problem.
Huge contributor.
But it seemed to have worked out for you, maybe, right? So why don't you talk about, I guess, quickly your experience, but then also kind of your thoughts on grad school, good, bad, whatever.
Yeah. So my batting average improved in applying to grad school for MBAs, right? So I applied to 2 programs, got into both. Thank you very much.
What was the other one?
UMass. Yeah.
Got it. Yep.
UMass has a great MBA program. So the decision was, again, and this is where, you just a victim or a recipient of the environment you're in. But when I got out of the Peace Corps, it was the housing bubble. So it was 2009. Nobody's hiring anywhere. I got a job doing the decennial census prep work, right? Just canvassing houses and stuff, like to literally just make some money from getting home. But it kind of forced the issue of like, okay, people aren't hiring freezes. And I was already thinking about going to get an MBA. And my rationale was when I was in Peru as a small business development volunteer, I was looked at basically as an expert on everything. There's a lot of funny stories in there, but the people I was helping try to start and grow businesses looked at me for help on every single thing, accounting, marketing, all sorts of stuff, organizational setups. I just realized like the more you know, the more helpful you can be, right? The more you can contribute. So like an MBA was sort of like didn't know enough. And I studied economics and math, and it was both theoretical type stuff, like wasn't applied subject matter, like accounting or say finance, right? So for me, it was just like I had a clear view of like I love business, I love helping, working with startup companies and or entrepreneurs. Like I don't have the entrepreneur gene necessarily, but I liked supporting them, and So MBA was the program for me. Law school, no thanks. I was definitely, that was no longer even part of the calculus for me. And then Peace Corps has a great relationship with the University of South Carolina. So it's an international MBA program. It's full immersion language study. Uh, big focus on getting international jobs or jobs with international focus. And so it was like right down my alley. So like for me, it was and it's state school, very affordable, good ROI, like good companies recruit there. So like I did my homework. I knew enough then and be like, if I'm going to borrow this money, what am I going to get out of it? And it was great. And again, I studied Arabic there, got to live in the Middle East for, almost I guess basically a year, doing full immersion, studying and working, and got some great jobs from it. I worked at the State Department because of that. I got hired by Exxon. So like the ROI, the straight line to ROI was clear for me, right? And I think that's what I would give for advice is make sure, and that's a huge theme too, is just understand exactly what you're going to get out of it. It's not undergrad, you could argue experiential. That school shouldn't be. It should be, I'm doing this to learn this so I can get this job and make this amount of money. And is my feedback.
I think that's pretty good, pretty practical. Well, now we got the sexy resume, Degs, finally. So now we got the Peace Corps. Now we got fluent in Spanish and Arabic, and here we come, ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
And I know you would, again, from my perspective, had a pretty unique experience where month on, month off in Iraq, your commute to work every day includes wearing, a helmet and a flak jacket and armored vehicle going to tell us about your ExxonMobil experience in Iraq just quickly.
Yeah. So I just so like when I graduated South Carolina, I got a job working for a refinery out in Torrance, California. So it's like just south of LA, the South Bay. Paradise, wonderful experience, a couple years there. But while I was there, I basically raised my hand and said, if there's any jobs in the Middle East, I would love to go. Right, that's kind of why I came here. And so the right person found out, and they said, got this new project in Basra, Iraq, southeastern Iraq down near Kuwait, and but it's rotational, right? So basically, which is a new thing for I'd say back office support jobs like finance and accounting. That's what I was in, right? Finance is my focus. Most operations folks, they don't want them traveling in and out of projects, so they go and stay there, right, for months on end. But they were making a change with this specific project. So yeah, Dubai was our regional hub, but I was supposed to spend 28 days in Iraq, living in a trailer, going into the office, working with the Iraqis, helping support them on this project, and then a month off, right, 28 days off, right? That was my rotation. So it was awesome. Get very unique experience and just interesting. My first shift in Iraq, actual shift. So I spent 2 months doing training and things, mostly living in Dubai, going back and forth a little bit. But my first actual 28 days on, I think day 8 or 9, ISIS attacked Mosul in northern Iraq and everybody out. So I was evacuated for the next, I worked out of Dubai for the next 6 months because they didn't want anybody in country unnecessarily. So that was obviously very, very interesting experience as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it used to be very annoying for me and all my friends because Degs had such an exotic background and he had been all over and he's making all this money now with ExxonMobil and home for a month and away for a month. So we were very relieved when he came home for good and he was just a normal, day-to-day average Joe like the rest of us.
Yeah. As Mazda calls me, boring Degs. Oh, thank God we finally got boring Degs.
It's good to have you off that pedestal.
Yeah, and I want to clear the air too on something. A lot of my local friends and even my family members still, they think I'm in the CIA. I've never been.
Supposedly, well, I know you have to say that, especially
the more I deny it, the more people believe it. But I have never been in the CIA. That is that is totally false.
Yeah, well, I know you had to say that, but anyways, okay. So then you came home, you got into the was it Siemens and then investment banking?
Yeah. Worked for Siemens, doing kind of same thing, corporate finance type stuff, and then I had enough of that. A great company, great people. Just sort of again, I sort of got addicted to the challenge, need to do more, kind of do the next thing, and then I got into investment banking.
Yada yada yada, made your millions and found your way to us. But I'll give from my perspective, right, of the overlap or whatever, how you came to be at Cap, and you can add in your perspective, but you had always been, I don't know, a informal advisor, I guess, right? I always wanted, you said it, you don't have the same entrepreneurial gene that I have, and I don't have the same, I don't know, organizational, data driven, all the stuff that you have, right? Legal bullshit.
Yeah.
So I always wanted your advice, guidance, hey, here, I think we're solving this really important problem. I think we're doing a pretty decent job of it, but look at this stuff, right? And I'd always use you as a sounding board. But then as we're home and we're thinking about, I don't know how much longer I want to be in investment banking. I brought you into the fold closer, right? I got more excited about our opportunity and again, what we were solving. And then as we evolved into the technology, I thought there was a bigger opportunity than what we were doing, and was just, I said it. Ever since I met you, I was like, those Ivy Leagues got it wrong. If I ever have a chance to bet on you, I'm going all in.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
And so that was kind of, again, from my perspective, I just said, hey, come be involved in any capacity that you want to be. And I think you can take us to the next level because your strengths are my weaknesses, basically. And so that was, I don't know. And then it just kind of happened, I don't know, organically once you sunk your teeth in, I guess. And I talk about it from
I mean, for the audience sake, right? So you've always been an entrepreneur, right? You had your own landscaping business as a high school kid. Right? I remember when you said that in college, I'm like, oh yeah, sure you did. And you're like, no, I really do. You had your own business, you had employees, like you just always been more risk aggressive, I guess, and willing to bet on yourself, which I never had. I'm getting there. I've evolved in that way. I've always been a very conservative sort of, again, if you go to Ivy League school, go to law school, I got this job, everything works out. And so as you started, what was College Funding Services and now it's College Aid Pro, I was just like impressed, right? There's so much, I just like, people hire you to do what? Well, now what's the problem here? And how does it work? And, what do you charge? Like, they get same stuff I was doing for my artisans in Peru. I was basically like doing it in my mind for you. It was sort of like, all right, well, how does this work? What's the business model? How does it flow through? And back, 15 years ago was scalability. How do you scale a business like this? Like how big market forces and dynamics and challenges. It was just fascinating, right? And then as I got into investment banking, I saw it was mostly M&A, right? So selling high growth tech companies, right? So companies that were looking to get acquired by strategic or private equity. And the big job, part of that job is you take us company and you kind of tell the story and you feed it in and weave it in with the market dynamics and the opportunity, right? And the problem being solved, et cetera. And so like, as you started developing a software company, which again, you and Billy should do a separate podcast on the origins of College Aid Pro. But just how big the problem was, how pervasive it was, and how no one had stepped up to solve it was just sort of like, come on, like every entrepreneur thinks they've created something unique and different. And I can't, no one's done this before, right? The truth is, the reason I dove in with you guys, I was like, you're actually right. No one has actually done this yet. It is fascinating and frustrating and just sort of like the opportunities is huge from a business standpoint, but just like the necessity is also just like glaring. Like, again, I joked that you were trying to sell me on me joining and I was trying to sell you on letting me join, when it finally came to it. So, but I think it's worked out.
So far, so good. And again, it was always, and again, I think you more came from it from a macro experience and just being interested in macroeconomics and solving problems just at a market level, where I was just always focused on, the front lines, because that was my experience, just helping this family try to figure this out the right way. And then
heartache with individual families, right, was always the thing you talk about, right? It's sort of like, I can't, you listen to this, how hard this is for this family and that family. I'm like, I can't believe it. And you're like, this is not unique either. This happens all the time.
And what I realized again, always, and still do, right? We're still surprised. And I would have never thought this 20 years ago, is like, somebody has to be the TurboTax, the CPA of this college problem, right? And I mean, we say this ad nauseum. I said it again, I think on one of the things this week where I was like, imagine every taxpayer went through this process on their own. They didn't use a TurboTax if they're DIYer. If they weren't more complicated, if they were more complicated, they didn't use a CPA. There was no such thing. How friggin' happy would the IRS be, basically, right? This is what we have in how people navigate this college thing. And I would argue it's more opaque. It's more complex. It's more dynamic and fluid than the friggin' tax code. Sure. Right? In most situations, right? Across the board. So,
and more foreign, right? You only do it a certain time of your life, really, right? Unless you have big kids like my parents. You're doing it for a very short window. So like, it's not something you do every April, it's the risk of making the mistakes and the ignorance involved is just way higher. Yeah.
And not to mention the emotion, right?
That and is the emotion.
The tax code is a little bit less emotional. We're not talking about kids getting rejected to their top choices. And what if they get into or in some ways, worse yet, get into their top choice and we can't freaking afford it.
You can't pay for it.
So, all right, well, let's kind of talk about just, I guess from your perspective, just like number one, we'll talk about solutions, but how do we get here? Just as a country, when I say here, I mean $1.7 trillion in debt. Everybody knows college out of control prices. And you could say, in summary, just not working for a lot of people. Of course, it still is for a lot of people, but for too many people, I would argue, our system's not really working.